This is the Family Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Janet Zinn. You're a psychotherapist and author. And
Yes,
welcome to the Family Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
thanks. I'm thrilled to be here. It's really an honor. So,
Well, thank you for being on the show tonight. We do have your URL there that will be clickable. We're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch at the moment. So the https://janetzinn.com will be clickable in the podcast description on those channels. And we'll also be on all the other podcast channels that you can view or listen to a podcast by tomorrow.
great.
But given that, the other thing we always ask any guest that's on the show before we start talking about your story is what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Um, let's see. What motivates me is I meet and listen to such amazing people. And I think the most profound thing in terms of being a therapist is the courage that it takes to move past whether external or internal limitations to be able to like bring more joy or to reach people, their goals. And so to be a witness to that is like an incredible privilege. And it's always, I am always awe-inspired. So,
That's, yeah, it's a good work to do because I work with a lot of creative people, and sometimes like our work is our catharsis, but we still need to talk to people. We
yes.
need to talk to therapists and talk to, coaches, and because we will hit the wall, we'll hit these ideas, where sometimes, like as an artist, like we get trapped in the idea of like creating chaos is what gives us the work.
Hmm.
It's like only the sad songs are good, so you kind of purposely, you know, like you actually make things go bad, so you have a story to tell.
Yes, exactly. It's it's hard to know, like,
Sabotage.
okay, yeah, like
Self-sabotage is kinda like the singer-songwriter's like, "Oh, that's how I make my living."
well, it is wonderful when people can bring art from something that's really dark. I mean,
Yeah,
that's an extraordinary gift in and of itself, and then that's therapeutic for others.
yeah, it's just like if you get trapped in the cycle where, like, if you're happy, nobody likes the songs that when you're happy. They only like the songs like James Taylor, like, Fi
Yes,
I See Fire and I See Rain. When he actually got happy, he wrote a song, like, nobody liked that song. They like it when he wasn't happy.
yes.
But that's a bad thing to place to be if you're like, that's your career, but, yeah, it's interesting to be in a career where you're helping people. I always find, that's a cool place to like you're actually, you're trying to help humanity. So in terms of what do you find gratifying about your work by like helping people get through things?
What do I find gratifying? I mean, how I see myself is more a facilitator for my clients, because they're really the ones who are like doing are heroes and doing all the work. I'm witnessing, and maybe I'm like seeing some patterns, or I'm noticing something that uh, they've gone through before, or that that is related to another part of their life, and that we can bring that together. Um, so, like I'm more like an observer, um,
Yeah.
and and just to be able to observe that, and to be able to then be with people's humanity. And I do think everybody wants to be their best self, and just some people get caught in some things that trap them from not being able to realize that.
Well, some folks have a hard time kind of putting into words what's going on in their life.
Absolutely.
And maybe you help facilitate that conversation so people can get comfortable with the hard stuff. Because like it's easy to say, "Well, how's the weather? What's the sports team?" It's like it's harder to like look into that looking glass self in the mirror and actually start to if you figure, why am I triggered by this? Why do I keep on doing this? Why do I keep on doing that? And those are hard things you might not want to deal with.
Oh, sure. It makes a lot of sense why some people kind of perpetuate certain things, because it's like really hard to go to those places and to notice things about ourselves that maybe we don't really want to know. Um, I, that's really difficult for some people, and some people aren't able to do that. And that's okay. Hopefully they'll find a different way. Um,
Mhm.
and sometimes it's not verbal. Sometimes it comes out in other ways.
Other
Uh,
ways, yeah.
I'm sure you've seen artists who just can express themselves that way. And so it might not be verbal, but
Yeah, it could be painting, like
yeah,
painting. There's a
yes,
lot of stuff like
yeah,
visual photographers, they can, like, capture, like, that feeling, and
right.
it's kind of our talent that, like, you capture that, you can kinda pull the muse, and it's, like, part of your stuff in your subconscious that you can recognize, and then as an
Yes,
artist, you have your tool, your eye, your camera, your voice, your
right.
hands, whatever it is, and you're able to actually, make it happen. You can bring that into the world, and then
That's
people can
extraordinary.
get to see it or hear it or feel it.
Yes,
And I
yes,
think, like, that's why there's art therapy because, like, even if you can't paint, it's still good to give somebody a tool to express themselves, like, even if they're not the best painter or they're not
right.
best at line drawing or any kind of art therapy I've always found to be, as an artist, it's like, "Well, yeah, what's wrong with doing that?"
And I always think it's so helpful when we actually do things that we're not good at, because it first of all, it's humbling, and it reminds us like that we're always learning something, and we always can be new at something. And the more we're able to like have activities in terms of not being good at that, but
Yeah.
still wanting to do it, we learn something about ourselves or others. That's pretty extraordinary.
What do you think about the strive for perfection? It's something I've always kinda dealt with, in the industry I'm in is like, I'm a big, supporter of, like, this idea of the happy accident,
Yes.
where some people wanna have everything perfect, every note perfect,
Hmm.
where I'm more like, if you let something just happen and you put it down and you go back and look at it, a lot of times the unplanned thing, the thing where you just kinda let go and you trust your fact that you've 10,000 hours on the piano or 10,000 hours on guitar, 10,000 hours on the camera, that what you're gonna do is probably gonna be good. And then you can just find if there's something here I didn't even expect because you start to trust your instincts.
Absolutely. I think it's so important for us to learn how to trust ourselves and to like be able to identify what gets in the way of that. And I think I think sometimes perfection can work towards somebody's advantage if they understand that in the striving, they may not reach it, but that it might be motivating for them. But I
Mhm.
think more often, particularly because there's so many voices of what we should and shouldn't do and how it should be and what success, and so we don't get to then come back to ourselves. I think it gets in the way more often than it can be a wonderful tool, but I think more often it either stops people and so they quit
Yeah,
skating.
if you quit, then it's
Yeah,
not effective.
right.
Like, if you're somebody that's, "Okay, I'm gonna do 30 takes of this song because I wanna get it right,"
Mhm.
right? And I always do that, right? But I always put the song out. But if you're a
Yes,
person that does like 100 takes and then you never put it out,
exactly.
and I think that's a problem.
Right, because you're one that's getting in their own way, because it's like perfection becomes more important than living,
Yeah, and then you're not
and
ready.
I
You're so scared of being vulnerable. I think what
yes,
I've seen is, like, people wanna be safe, people are scared of vulnerability, and they're
yes,
not really cool with being authentic. Like, so they'll build masks or they'll build stage
yes.
selves or other self because they can't handle the rawness of the real looking glass self.
It takes so much courage to be vulnerable, and, there's a lot of people that, like, give the message that you're not safe if you're gonna be vulnerable, and, I'm not interested in hearing about you, like, and so people then find ways to protect themselves from that vulnerability, and sadly, it doesn't allow for them to live as themselves and to feel comfortable and to kind of have that personal freedom to be, and then to express themselves in whatever way is right for them.
So if I get to your book with
Yeah,
titles interesting, it's like Time of the Coronavirus, reflecting on the past to create a joyful future. And that joyful
yes,
future I'm kind of keying in on because I think some
yes.
people maybe feel shamed about having joy, right? Like they think things have got to be hard. And if you have joy, then that you're having too much fun and you shouldn't do that.
Absolutely. I think there's a couple of things. One is that like people are scared to show. I think sometimes being happy is like a place of vulnerability, and people are really scared of that because they think that, and I'm sure it's from their history, that if that's been taken away. I mean, we can all relate to like experiences we had when we were young of like, look at this, and it's like somebody's not paying attention, or they're doing something else, or they look at it and goes, yeah, that's nice, or like, or just like, I can't put that up, or whatever,
Yeah, yeah.
and so then that shuts us down, as opposed to like joy is something to continually share, and you will find the people that connect with that. And there is something very contagious about joy. So, I mean, if we all think about the people around us who like we feel better about ourselves having been in their presence, and then other people are like, that might have been a nice time, but why do I feel bad? I should have said this instead of that, um, people that don't make us feel that joy.
Yeah. Well, if you get the vibe, like you walk in a room and you get that kind of that bad vibe,
Yeah,
the kind
totally.
of prickly person, the
Yeah.
person that's hard to be around.
Hmm.
It's like you're kind of walking on eggshells. It's like I don't know what's going on with this, and then that doesn't make it feel you don't feel comfortable. But if you're like in the law of attraction and you can be your authentic self, you're around people and
Yes.
they get you right. So
Yeah,
you find like
absolutely.
your tribe because
Yes,
then you start to like, okay, if I'm around these people and I'm vulnerable, they don't make me pay for it, right?
exactly.
They make me feel good. I don't feel like I gotta hide. Then you're
Yes.
probably like in the right place.
Yes. And then you feel like you can be more yourself, and then they get to be more themselves, and it just is just a very enriching experience to have.
Yeah, when you get in that zone, there's sometimes like I live in like two zones. It's like I'm in the corporate world as a
Mm,
as a business analyst doing software design, kind of left right brain, and then I'm in the
yes.
creative world where
Wow.
people like they don't understand that world at all because it's like they can't even be in it for 5 seconds. It's like, wow, it's too heavy. I can't do it. Um, and I found a way to not be a starving artist. To kind of live in both worlds.
Yes, to be a Renaissance man.
Yeah, it's a different mindset. But some people is like just like all or nothing. They can't find a middle way.
Right. And people want to cut off a part of themselves and say, I'm this, as opposed to you, like, who've expanded and say, like, no, this is really important to me. And so is this. Like, so I'm going to bring that together. And that's just part of who I am and what I
Yeah, I
can.
think a lot of people can wear a lot of hats, but a lot of times the world wants you to wear one hat.
Oh, yes.
There's a lot of hats that you could be wearing, and people do it, and then they don't really talk about it because then they're
Yes.
scared. Like, oh, no, I'm a little home chef, but I don't tell anybody about family, and like, or I like to do, local plays, or I like to do
Yes.
photography, or I like to, but they won't, if they're in some kind of actuarial, so they your whole life should be an actuary, and that's all you should be caring about.
Yes. I think people want to feel safe. And it's like, okay, if we put you in this category, then I can just like, that feels easier, as opposed to like, there's so much that people can offer, and that they have in their lives that they're not sharing, that really kind of can enrich us.
With the coronavirus, was really interesting to me what happened because
Hmm.
I was already working remotely. I had been a road warrior, and maybe
Wow.
for like 3 years before the coronavirus, I was working at home so I could have this balance.
Yes.
So I was already kind of set up
That's
at high
amazing.
speed, had all this stuff. Because the reason I did it, because I used to be traveling like a road warrior, like Sunday to Thursday. And I'd be in a place for 6 months, 12 months, and I'd only be with my family for 3 days, and then I got to leave on Sunday night. And that was like the idea, like, oh, you have to do that,
Hmm.
to show that you're really into it. You had to show
Yes.
your willingness, your dedication to the craft to do that. And
Yes.
then I saw that like once the COVID, and I actually decided to get off that train before COVID, but COVID kind of made people get off that train, and it wasn't a choice.
Right. Right. And you really see, like, some people, they thrive in the company of others, and other people were thriving, like, they were like a lot of people that were introverts were like, "People have told me for years to, like, go out," or, "Why are you reading a book?" And, like, I'm set up for this, you know?
Yeah, like
Um, yeah.
neurodivergent folks can actually
Oh,
operate really
absolutely.
well in that
Yes.
kind of environment. And if you force them to go back to the office, they might not perform
That's
because
true.
of the tension of all that extra stuff
Yes.
that the kind of able-bodied person, people like ableist is like, well, everybody should have to do that. Which
Exactly.
is it doesn't actually fit everybody. Like, if you're autistic or neurodivergent, or you've got health issues, and you've gotta be taking care of an elderly parent, or you're
Mhm.
taking care of a spouse with a critical illness, it's like you wanna have some life balance, and you can still do it.
Yes.
Why do you have to be in the plane and on the Uber and in the airport and all that extra time is like to prove what?
Exactly, and it's somebody else's agenda as opposed to, if, let's say, somebody's taking care of, elderly parents, it allows them to, like, give their best at work because they can be
Or
present
these.
when they're
Yeah.
there, they understand what's going on at home, and it's right for them. Now, somebody else might say, "No, I need to leave the house and let somebody else do that while I can work so I can have something else," and that would be right for them.
Yeah. That sometimes people want one way for everybody.
Yes.
And I've always like kind of I questioned like why do you guys think there's only one way to do it? We know in math there's multiple ways for me to come out like in an algebraic equation or something that's calculus. I can come at it different ways. And in my business and software, we have multiple ways to get to solve a problem. So where we get these people say there's only one way, I'm kind of like, yeah, where are you getting that from?
Yeah, and it really diminishes creativity, and it, you know, diminishes also people's, like, alacrity at work because it's harder to feel motivated when you're saying, like, "We don't want that part of you. You can only show up this way."
But I kind of want it's like a control. I think certain people want to micromanage, want to know their person's in the cube. I know their tools. I can actually know if somebody's at their desk. I can see their keystrokes. I can see what they're doing. Doesn't matter where they are. Right.
Yes.
So that's not about it. It's not about that. And so is it about the problem also you've got people in different groups like women or minorities or people that are not native speakers. They could be, I've seen them work bullying, kind of high school, kind of college prank kind of behavior that
Mhm.
maybe people don't understand like that for somebody, then when they can work remote, that gets pulled out of the equation,
Right.
and then they don't have to worry about that. And
Yes.
so, like, that's not really beneficial, but if you don't have the sensitivity or empathize that those things are actually going on, then
Yes.
you don't value the situation. And you
Exactly.
don't value the feedback.
Well, the key word that you said there was empathy, because if somebody doesn't understand that somebody has a different experience than one's own, then it's like, well, I know what's right because this is good for me, so it must be good for you too, as
Yeah.
opposed to like, tell me about who you are and like what's going to be best for you.
Yeah,
Because
because I mean, yeah,
curiosity.
I remember one time I was at work and somebody said you could have diversity of thought, but not have diversity in culture in the boardroom, and I'm like, "Really?" So
Whoa.
all you guys that are in the country club, you're all in the same group. You don't need anybody else because like somehow you can have a diverse opinion in that group when
Hmm.
you're not diverse at all. Like, okay, it's like that's where they tried to actually they verbally told me that, and I'm like, okay, I know where these guys are coming from.
Right. You just told me your limitation, right? Like it's like, and they don't know that that's what they're telling you.
Yeah, well, some people are so obvious, but maybe they're not aware of it.
No,
Um,
exactly.
but what did you find in your book? What are some of your conclusions or your big like lessons learned that came out of that? Writing that book.
Um, some of the lessons that I learned. in writing it? Well, the first thing is that I always wanted to write a book, and I I thought, okay, I'm going to do that like at some point, but I didn't realize how hard it was. So that was definitely a thing. And so I had much bigger appreciation for authors of all kinds in terms
Mhm.
of what it takes, because I really was ignorant about the process. So that was a big thing that I learned. But in terms of the content of the book and what I learned was that how that there are many ways to make space for ourselves in life and in the world, and that we have to kind of embrace our humanness so that we can find out, like, rather than identifying, like, if I have a bad day and maybe I'm like snarky or like I have some sharp edges, that I use that to say, like, oh, I'm more vulnerable than I thought, rather than shaming myself for,
Mhm.
like, I should be nicer person. Like, yeah, I'll work on that. But like, but in to work on it, I have to be where I am. So I have to have some compassion
Oh, yeah, for yourself.
for
Yeah.
that, for myself and for others, that maybe they're coming from a place also that's difficult for them. And so we just are seeing things differently. And so, like, then, you know, working it through that way. So really finding, like, how we can be a little bit more curious with what others are going through or what the world's going through, and
Yeah.
not be so definitive. Those were just some of the things that I've learned.
Well, it's like empathy and listening skills. I find sometimes, like, if you get a boss and you have an hour meeting, and it's
Yes,
supposed to be a status meeting, and the boss takes 25 minutes and just gives a speech,
yes,
and there's 20 people in the room who are supposed to give a status, and they spent 25 minutes, just one person talking.
yes,
So they kind of set in the tone that you really don't want to hear anybody else in the room.
right.
So you got to figure, like, well, then they wonder why they're not getting honest feedback. Because if you set the tone that your voice is the most important voice,
Yes.
and people aren't going to feel their voice is valid.
Valid, or that it's going to make a difference, and that's an awful way to feel in a room. You want to know, like, somebody's interested in what I have to offer, even if it's like, oh, that won't work for this. Like, at least you feel like, okay, I got to contribute something.
Like, you feel like if you know you've got a boss or you're in a situation where you're having a discussion, you can have an open conversation and you're not going to get beat up. Not
Yes,
that people aren't going to challenge you, but they're going to do it in a respectful way that, it's just common courtesy, where sometimes people have, like, lost etiquette,
yes,
and there's a lot of bullying, and people think the more aggressive you are, like, oh, that's a good manager, or that's a good lead, rather than the person that actually listens to everybody on the team and takes all the input and then tries to synthesize. Not that it's always going to be democratic, but you need to hear everything so you know what is actually really going on.
yes,
And I find that sometimes that you run into situations like you could be in a house at a microcosm level, and that's happening. You could be at a macrocosm level, and that's happening. It's different. The
totally,
same kind of scenario happens every whatever level you're in.
absolutely, yes. And it's so challenging if you're in that situation of, like, okay, how can I be heard? How can I contribute when somebody isn't open to listening, and
Mhm.
think that they have the most important thing to say? Um, and conversely, when is it like, okay, I just have to not say anything at this moment, and though I will create a time and space, but I just have to see how this plays out.
Yeah. Well, you got to feel safe. It's like that
Oh,
safety thing. They're like the
yes.
wolf's always at the door in this modern world. And it's not the physical wolf. It's like a trigger word. It's the situation. It's the
Yes.
tension. It's the anxiety, and people don't feel, they don't feel good. Like your whole idea, like, how do you feel joy in a world that's kind of putting you in a box, making you feel like, if you're going in that box every day, but you don't feel good about it. And you're like, why am I doing this? I'm expected to do this, and then I don't seem to have any autonomy.
Well,
Like,
what
so
yeah, I mean, what's so hard is like, how do you, how, like, working with people to make sure that even if they're just building small, in a small way, like let's say they sing in the shower, but they go to work and they hate it, but that they derive joy from singing in the shower, that they can like slowly build that, so like there's much more strength, so that then they can move out of a situation that's really just harming to them and their well-being and their sense of self.
yeah, like how do you move toward joy when you feel like you have obligation and you have that sense of safety, and then there's that fear that the change in environment is more scary than the environment you're in.
Yes, that's such a great question, because it's, there's no one way. I think that people have to see where it fits, or where they're over giving in other, like let's say one can't leave their job because it's just their income and there's not like a lot of options at a given time, and but it feels so bad, and it really like diminishes somebody's sense of well-being, sense of confidence. So then they don't, so then it's really hard for them to start looking for a job, so then they have to build it in other ways, whether it's like being with the people that bring them joy, as you talked about earlier, and or if it's in other ways of just like, okay, I need to read like so many self-help books, or I need to listen to podcasts that are uplifting, or, and to remind people like that, just like keep building, even if it's like a small flame, just like keep
Yeah. Or you
fuel
can
with.
have little wins. Like people always look for the big win,
Hmm.
but like you can have little wins throughout the day. Then you don't have to beat
Exactly.
yourself up about
Absolutely. In
the big
fact, I
win.
think that's, I always think like people are looking for headlines, and it's really the incremental, small, little adjustments and changes that are made throughout any given day that really build um, our well-being and, you know, our
It's
joy.
like the happy accident versus like perfectionism. Like in my
Exactly.
craft, the
Yes.
people will sit there and write the bars and try to write like Bach or Beethoven to write something that detailed.
Hmm.
There's other people that's like, you know what, I'm gonna be like Herbie Hancock and Miles Davis. I'm gonna kind of jazz improvise fusion.
Right.
Right. I got a structure, but the it can be it got some main points, but we can keep on changing in between.
Yes.
It's free form. And so the
Yes.
piece can continually evolve. And so there's no real bad note. There's an opportunity to evolve the piece. So it gives you a lot of freedom. And then some people are like scared of that freedom. I remember I talked to a classical artist and they couldn't understand the improvisational
Wow.
strategy of a fusion artist because they were looking like, I need to know what the note's gonna be.
Hmm.
And the fusion artist is like, that's the whole fun of it is not knowing what it's gonna be. And then their mindset was, I gotta know what it's gonna be. And they had a hard time not knowing what it's gonna be. And you would think they're technically at the same level player, but
Hmm.
put them in the fusion group and they didn't know what to do. They
Like
had to be directed.
the thing that came to mind to me is because both are extraordinary. So like I thought like of the a classical musician is like a tennis player, and the improvisational musician or fusion musician is like a surfer. It's like you
Yeah,
don't know
we don't know what that
wave
wave's gonna be
wave-
until it
yeah,
comes. You just
exactly.
kinda ride the wave and you have the ability to ride any kind of wave.
Yeah.
You deal with it. Yeah, it's kinda like reading the situation. You're like, your situational awareness
Yes.
to read the cues in the room. You feel the crowd, you feel the room, you feel the other people, a lot of
Hmm.
nonverbal cues, and then the trust in your 10,000 hours of playing that bass,
Right.
playing that sax that you got it. So if you hear something, you go with it. And it's
Yeah.
not you don't worry about it. Like, it's like living in a moment to, like, the fullest, but you're not apologizing for it. Which is, it's hard it's a cool place to be in, but some people can't ever put themselves in that place because the
Yeah.
fear and the safety issues.
It's true. Some people really. aren't comfortable in that space, and it's not, they're not going to feel like they're thriving in that space, as opposed to somebody who's like saying, okay, I'm going to be open to this. I'm going to see where this takes me. I don't know. Yes, it could be scary, but I'm just going to go with it, and we'll see, and
Yeah.
it's that curiosity that I find so extraordinary. Um,
Well, I think it's important. Like if you live your life, you're somebody like I like to. You get these guys who are like people who like to travel, and they don't know what it's going to be like. They
right.
don't know the language, but they're willing. It's like, oh, they go to 50 countries. They travel around, and it's like, how can they do that? Because they kind of like they got that jazz idea.
Yes.
They know that when I get there, I don't know, I don't know Cantonese, I don't know Japanese, or I don't know the Korean. It's like, but if I go there, I'll figure it out. And then
Yes.
people are like, how could you do that? It's like, because you can.
Exactly. Which is just amazing. But I do find that there are certain people that are inclined to go and take risks, and there are certain people that are more comfortable,
With
with the
the
predictable or what they know. And it's like, it's so important to be able to exercise a different part of ourselves.
Yeah, it's
Like,
kinda like you gotta have the balance to try to left, right
exactly.
brain, a little bit of
Yes.
discomfort is not bad,
Right.
as long as you're not hurting
Exactly.
yourself, it's like
Yeah.
sometimes you have to try the thing that you don't know.
Yes,
Mm.
exactly. So if familiarity is, um, you know, is easy, then like you can risk, and say like, okay, I'm going to push myself, but I'm not going to compromise who I am. And but you're still pushing yourself in a direction. Or if some people are adventure seekers, and it feels so bad to just stay in one place. So it's like,
Yeah,
okay, let me just see what that's like and what I'm going through. Not like, oh, you need to change yourself.
mhm.
Just like, let me see if I can build a new muscle.
Yeah, new just try something
Yeah,
out, like, even with your mindset. Like, the mindset is like, "Oh, I've got this mindset, it's not a growth mindset." I've kind of been in this kinda idea of, imposter syndrome where you're not good enough and you're never thinking about an abundance. You're always thinking
mhm,
about with scarcity.
yes,
Like, if you're always in that mindset, like, if you start to really kinda retrain your brain, that you actually can start to slowly get out of that if you're dedicated like the athlete that practices a three-point shot. You gotta find a way to have some repetition to kinda get
right.
into a groove.
Yes.
I would say it's like a musician, it's like, yeah, you gotta keep on playing that bass until you figure it out. Till you like, it's on the 2, it's on the 1, it's on the 4, which one? It's like, figure it out. But in terms of people facing hardships today, like, there's a
Yes.
lot of people that have a lot of mental anguish, and it seems like sometimes, the healthcare industry doesn't actually treat, like,
No.
illnesses equally. Like, if you got a heart disease or diabetes, they're on it. If
Hmm.
you look at your health plan and you've got a mental issue, a lot of times they have a restriction on how much care they're actually gonna give you per year.
Absolutely.
And, like,
It's
how is that as somebody that works in the industry? How do you handle that kind of like, the industry not actually treating things with the same, I don't know, care?
it's a big challenge. And like for me, I just go individual to individual, and work with each person given the circumstances and where they are, and um, and balance that with just making a living as well.
Mm,
But like really being mindful that like the healthcare system itself can, and dealing with that can be its own trauma, and
mhm,
and that it can be really crushing for certain people. And if one's feeling particularly vulnerable in terms of their mental health or their well-being, and it's going to crush them a little bit more, because they're they don't have the stamina to wait for hours on the phone to talk to a representative. And if they do talk to a representative, the representative isn't listening to what they're saying and what they're struggling with. They have, rules and regulations, and they're going to stick to that. And so
yeah,
it can be harmful. Uh,
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's following the Hippocratic oath,
so
do no harm. It's like, okay, you guys are kind of going back to like the banking. It's like it's the ledger that's
it's
more important to you
yes.
than the care. And
Yes,
so like,
because it became a business model rather than a care model, um, that
yeah,
moved
that's
in a different
disappointing.
direction.
Yeah, that's where people try to find, alternatives. And, there's a lot of people that are coaches and
Yes,
therapists that maybe aren't licensed or don't have the same rigor that somebody who's like an official like psychotherapist or somebody who's been trained. So
ab
what have you thought about like going on? Because on the podcast I talk to people who are kind of like out there as you know they're out there kind of freelancing it, and then maybe they offer some value, but like what are your thoughts about that? What's going on in the world today in this space?
well, I have maybe a very different take, I'm not sure, but I really think that there are people that have different kinds of training and different modalities, and if they're gifted, they're gifted. And if they're not, they're not. And
Mhm.
it's what's hard is when people are at their most vulnerable and when they need help, when somebody's more like, oh good, like I I can set you up, as opposed to like, I see what you're going through and let's find the right kind of platform for you that's going to
Yeah,
resonate with who you are and what you want from this. So I feel like, there's great therapists, some that I'm just in awe of, and that there's some that I'm just kind of, oh, I'm embarrassed to be in the same, you know, in, in the same field as you. So, and then I'm not saying that there's not wonderful therapists out there, but there's some that have hurt people.
hmm, yeah.
You
Well, everybody's human and everybody's perfect, and that's why people have to you kind of gotta look and see is somebody actually speaking to your
right.
individual issue. If you feel like somebody's cookie cutter or they're trying to make you, fit the 10 step, 12 step, 16 step, whatever step they came on it,
Yes.
but it's not resonating. You got to
Right.
step 14 and it's like, this isn't working. This is what maybe it's not you. It might be like, well, this isn't maybe the right thing for you. Maybe you need to figure out
Exactly.
something else.
Then the hard part is if someone has a low self-esteem, they can feel shame of like, why doesn't this work for me? I
Mm,
I should be better, by now, or I sh- I should be able to do this and I'm not able to do it, as opposed to like, no, no, it's just not the right thing for me. Let me find something else that feels better. I like, when I go work out, I'm not somebody who wants to be screamed at and do like, like, you got to get that.
alpha coach.
I
Gary,
want
like, you
to,
got to do it or you got to start all over again. You got to do
right?
all these reps.
I
Yeah.
want like somebody sweet. I want someone to say, "Yay, you showed up. This is great." And like,
Yeah.
"Thank you so much." And then I
You don't
feel
want
like,
the drill
okay,
sergeant.
yeah, I
Yeah.
can keep going.
Drill sergeant, it's not going to work.
Right. But somebody else loves that kind of training, and they're like, they feel motivated and pumped,
Yeah.
and so like you just want to find what's
Yeah,
going
what
to work.
speaks to you? Like,
Yes.
and then they had, like, permission structures for people to feel like, like, "Hey, it's not working. It's not me. It's not working." It's like some people, like, have a hard time, complaining or saying it's like, yeah, they get a bad, order at the restaurant and they won't complain.
Hmm.
'Cause it's kinda,
Yes.
they get a product and there's something wrong with it and they don't return it because they don't want the hassle 'cause
Right.
they got the problem with, kinda speaking up.
Hmm. Yes, it could be that they're a people pleaser, like, oh, somebody will be upset with me if I complain about this, or I'm going to give them more work if I return it, as opposed to feeling like it's okay for you to do that. They can be responsible for how they process that or take or like deal on their end about it. And that's okay. Like we both grow if
Mhm.
we're like upfront.
So in your career, you've done, like, crisis counseling and then long-term therapy.
Yes.
Have you seen, like, what the major differences, maybe you can speak to between the both of those?
Sure. I started doing crisis counseling after 9/11, and I live in New York City, so I happened to have a job that was downtown. So the next day I just went downtown,
Mhm.
worked with families. And then from there, I was asked to work at some companies um, that were downtown. And so I started working with like first responders um, and people who had witnessed the World Trade Centers coming down, the two towers,
Mhm.
and then other people that just worked there who lost colleagues and friends and loved ones. And so in doing that work, I had been trained to do that work, but I it wasn't like such an intense experience. And they did have people from all over the world come
Come to do
to
that.
to help. So I was very fortunate to like be able to learn from some people that had dealt with war
Experts.
zones and other tragedies, and so that is different in terms of you're dealing with people who are in shock, who have just experienced loss. And so it's only to be able to help them to understand that even though it can feel crazy making in terms of what they're going through, they are not crazy to have such a strong response. But also that it's hard when that's not how they know themselves,
Mhm.
but something was disrupted that changed their
Yeah. It's
sense
like
of
being in a war, well, it actually was a war zone, and it's like
yes,
post-traumatic stress. You actually
yes,
feeling
exactly.
almost like if you were in Vietnam or
Yes,
Afghanistan, World War
yes,
II, D-Day, it's actually you didn't expect that, but lots of places in the world, like Berlin got hit, like London got in World War II,
exactly.
there are places that actually had that. We just didn't s we saw Pearl Harbor, but we
E
never saw a city like New York getting hit like that.
right.
So that must have been it's like a world changer, just because the mindset of an American, right, is that you don't expect that.
No,
So that must have been a big game changer because people had this idea
people
that we're
thought
on
they
this
were safe.
yeah, we're on this top of this thing and nobody's ever gonna do that.
Exactly.
And
Nope.
then somebody did it. I would imagine that it was similar to people when they saw Pearl Harbor. Might have
Yes,
had the same idea, but that was like a base versus like
exactly.
this is a city.
Yes,
So it
yes.
must have been a different, whole different um,
So different.
thing to
Yeah,
deal with.
yeah. And, there was a lot of support in many different communities, and there was, um, there was people were humbled and like also were incredibly compassionate towards each other. So there was like kind of a very much a healing environment.
Healing aspect.
Uh,
Yeah, let's live where we are now, where we've got everybody's at their throats. You know,
yes, exactly.
like
Very,
there, everybody's like coming together. It's kind of like I guess what happened at Pearl Harbor. Like Americans got motivated and they joined the
yes,
Allies, and then they
yes,
said, "Yeah, we're gonna do something about this guy over the pond. We gotta take care of it, but take care of the Axis." But the idea
yes.
yeah, I think we felt the same way about going and fighting, Iraq and Afghanistan. It was like just coming together, and then now we're in this kind of coming apart. And there's probably a lot of people very anxious or like not understanding how to deal with these times.
Oh, so many people are anxious and people are like kind of acting out or like don't have less patience, have less stamina for like other people's, whether it's just a lot of frustration, a very high level of frustration and anxiety um,
Mhm.
that I see around, certainly in New York City.
Yeah, it doesn't seem as like I don't know. I was in New York around 2017, and it doesn't feel the same like the same place.
Oh no, it doesn't. It feels very different now.
Yeah, it's just like, "Oh, no, I feel as comfortable going and doing my shows like I used to."
Hmm.
So, I kinda done everything online because it's like, it's not the same vibe. It's
Uh,
like and you're
sorry,
kinda like, "Well" yeah, like, "Well, I guess I will come back at some point," but it's like, it don't feel like it right now.
it does. Yes, it does feel like when people are more intentional about the art that they see. So when you do come back, I think you'll find like there's a gratitude for music.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
You
I
know,
want to get back to that because that's I always want I want people to be able to receive it,
yes.
and people looking for it because they don't know if they're not looking for it. But I think people actually need it. I think they need to feel. Artists, we try to bring along the culture,
Hmm.
like have it go through the feelings
I
because
think
we
it's
kind
a
of key
transcendent
on the
experience.
feelings.
But I
That's
do think it's a healing experience and it's a transcendent experience. So it it gives texture or shape to whatever we are going through, and it also gives us like a way to kind of remove ourselves from
Mhm.
our minds and to
Yeah,
kind of feed our souls, if you will.
yeah. The whole thing about art is the feeding the soul. Is
Yes.
like kind of like a walk in the woods. You think I think one of the Victorian poets talked about like nature is the cathedral. You
Mm.
get rejuvenated by like walking in the pines.
Ah,
It's
yes.
like Longfellow, Hawthorne, a lot like I think Wordsworth. They all kind of had this idea that if you go walk into the pines or walk in the woods, that you're
Right.
gonna get restored by nature because it's just like going into a church. It's the same thing.
Yes.
Like you're gonna feel nature's restoration ability. That if you just walk out there, it will just automatic. It's just gonna happen. I mean, they talk about it in deeper terms in their poetry, but I've
Yes.
always felt that.
That's
It's a cool way. But I think you had mentioned you wanted to potentially bring up something that we had talked about prior to showing up on when our pre-interview section. Did you want to try that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Uh, you were gonna do like talk about like a day in a life in the previous.
Oh, yes. So this is the book in the
Mm.
time of coronavirus, and what happened in terms of writing the book is I actually started to write a book about different kinds of courage. And I just kept hitting walls, and it just wasn't kind of coalescing or coming together. And I had been doing a blog from the very first week of the coronavirus, um, because I found a couple of things. One was that I had traveled to Australia actually to talk about trauma, and I was going to talk about the wildfires there, except that there was like this new virus, and they're closer to China, and
Oh,
so
wow.
they were very much like
In the
worried
middle of
about
it. Yeah.
so it turned out to be a talk about what do other therapists do and how do they take care of themselves while they're taking care of other people, and what kinds of things can they do to help other people. And so I gave this talk. We talked about the coronavirus. I come back. There's like nobody on the plane coming back. And that weekend, after I came back, was the first week that everything shut down.
Everything hit. Yeah, it was a big shutdown because
Yeah.
people.
And so I, you know, given the talk, I knew that, and I was hearing from my clients that people were thinking like, well, what do I do? So I started writing just kind of like self-care things, like what we can do to get through it, thinking as we had been told, like it probably will be closed for 2 weeks and then we'll just keep going, and then we'll just be able to open up things. And so I just started writing this blog called In the Time of Coronavirus. And then I wrote it throughout the pandemic. And then I just have continued since then,
Wow.
changing it from in the time of coronavirus to in the time of the new normal. And,
Yeah.
and then like the no longer new normal. Like, so it just kind of has, uh,
Progression. Yeah. Well, it's just cool to keep something going so you have this like you know, be able to tie it
yes.
together and have some consistent like vehicle for what you're doing. It's a cool concept.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. And I mean, you do that with this podcast
Yeah,
and
I try to keep the thread
music.
going.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
with this
Um,
idea.
so I had been writing this other book, and it wasn't going anywhere. And a few people had said, like, you should make this into a book. And I just thought, yeah, yeah. And then when it wasn't going anywhere, and I'm like, I really want a book. Like, and I was like, well, I wrote this. So I'll just do the time, like, until everything kind of opened up again,
Hmm.
and like completely. And so I just had to do some edits and work towards getting this published. And yeah, and so that's how this book came to be. And so it is a book with photographs from like walks that I took during the pandemic,
Oh, wow.
as well as these little essays of just kind of reviewing. I did it week to week. And then in addition to that, I always gave self-care tips with the understanding that people can pick and choose what I like. That one, I think I'll do that. Or like,
Oh,
nah,
wow.
I want
Yeah.
that one. Because I think a lot of times we're told, oh, we should be doing this. And then we're like, oh, when I don't do it, I don't feel like I don't want to
You
admit
have a choice. Like you can pick and choose.
yes,
It's-
exactly. Like, see,
Yeah. See
like
what works for you.
exactly. It's kind of like a menu as opposed to, the meal. There's only one thing to eat,
Yeah. Well, it's a
So
less directed, more like, okay, here's a lot of things that you could take all these nuggets and see which one actually appeals to you or which one you resonate with.
yes,
Is a different it's kinda like when we do an album, like, we'll do a bunch of songs together, and, we tie somebody to the single, but then there's all these songs, and it depends on who you are, which ones resonate with you, right? So,
exactly,
we'll tell you which one that but a lot of times I don't like the single. I like the
right.
tracks that aren't the single. But that's
Often,
typical.
right?
That's usually what goes on.
If you're my age, it was like, oh, I always like side B,
Yeah, I would like the side B, I like this deeper track that never got on the radio, that's the
oh
song.
yes.
I wanna hear, "Dude, can you play that one in concert?" Like, "Yeah, that's the one you never play." Like, "Yeah, play that one." But, yeah, I think it's cool the way you did that, a menu-based concept. That's a different way, but maybe in nonfiction, it's clear to
Yeah,
happen
yeah,
that that can
and
happen.
really, it's like very much what I observed. I talk about myself in terms of like just how do I become a better person? What am I learning here? And like what kinds of things resonate with others. Um, so the like these are very short uh,
Mhm.
chapters, if you will, and this one is exactly 4 years ago this week. So it's like what we would be going through 4 years ago. Let's see. And this one's called "I Was Wrong." It's week 32. I was wrong. Last week I made acorn squash with essence of orange and maple syrup. I asked Larry, my husband, to bring a spoon as I thought that might be easier than a fork. He proudly came back with a grapefruit spoon. Silently, I was annoyed. Didn't I just ask him for a spoon? A regular spoon. I begrudgingly took it from him. I was tired, and rather than open up with vulnerability, I found myself closing down with negativity. When I tried the spoon, which had unobtrusive serrating, it turned out to be excellent choice for squash. Larry likes to find the perfect tool for the job, and I was wrong to not trust him. In the past, I wouldn't have even tried the utensil. I would have marched into the kitchen to get a regular spoon. Yes, I had been known to be that petty. Yet in this instance, being open allowed for a better culinary experience. For years, as a defense mechanism, I had needed to be right. I would even sacrifice a better experience and admit I was wrong. Or I'd say I was wrong, but secretly think I was right. It's hard to become a better person when I can't be open to all that is unknown. There's nothing like a pandemic to test the limitations of being right. So many of us thought this would be a short stint of sacrifice followed by triumph. It is anything but that. I am faced with foibles as I go through my days in a pandemic. For those of us who are parents, we see the cracks in our seemingly strong facades on a regular basis. As a therapist, I'm faced with the benefits and constraints of talk therapy. We have no answers now. We can talk about and work on making changes in how we deal with the circumstances that we currently are in, but we cannot immediately change the national and global ills. Personally and professionally, I believe speaking about our hardships with the intention of growing is invaluable. If we prefer something more active, vote. Also, we can deliberately make changes in the seemingly mundane. We just have to be open to doing something differently. Perhaps we'll get it right if we can admit we were wrong. It's working for me. Thank you, Larry. And then the self-care tips are: try using a grapefruit spoon for grapefruit squash or anything else that you deem applicable. Find a course or article online on art, music, dance, or theater history. It's great to dig a little deeper into an art form you appreciate. Change the way you put your shoes on or other daily habits. If you're a sock shoe person, put both socks on first. If you always start with your right foot, start with your left. See how it feels to switch up an ingrained habit. If you are incorrect about something, see if you can admit to being wrong. It might make you feel a lovely release. And do what you can. These can be challenging times, so do what you can. Appreciate you're doing the best under these circumstances. And that's
Well, that's lovely. I like the way the idea of using that fork. I mean, the spoon. Um,
yes,
the spoon, because yeah, you're like, oh, I'm just gonna knife and use it. I'm gonna go march and get a new one.
yes,
And it kind of showing like that. That's like a lot of people have that kind of reaction to things, like something that they think they know.
right,
And it's cool,
exactly.
like you were able to relay, like, oh, well, you could be wrong about that. And you think that the thing that you think your spouse is dead wrong on, and
Yes,
it's gonna totally like you're not doing it right, and then you're like, oh, how many times did I do that? And it was actually they were actually right.
right. And so many times I've just not been open to that, like, because I know somehow. And it's so much nicer um to like to be wrong, to like be like, oh, I'm learning something new.
Yeah. Well, you can't learn if you're always right. Like,
That is correct.
but now you gotta like you can't evolve if you're like I got it all, I got it down. It's like, oh, okay. Like really? It's like you have to the world changes so fast today
Yes,
with all the things going on, between the AI and the robotics and all the other stuff that's going on. It can feel very intimidating. But sometimes you have to get out of that comfort zone and you gotta, question like you did with the grapefruit spoon. It's like don't march in and take it away, go and change it. Actually go try it,
yes,
try
exactly.
it. And then you found it actually worked better, it made more sense. It was the right tool for the job. It's like that's
I
something that
know.
some people they miss all the time.
And like it's made things nicer in terms of just the experience of cooking, just to know that like I have a new tool to use.
Yeah. Well, if you actually are open to learning, because
Right.
that's everything the teachers always have to deal with is like if you get students that are not open to learning,
Yes.
like they've got to change the mindset in the class if everybody's like, on their phone, they're passing notes, and they think you're a loser teacher, so they're not going to listen to anything you say. So you've got to make them want it to know
Yes.
something. And when I had teachers that made me want to be there,
Oh,
then it was like that's the perfect scenario. When I had teachers where I
so
gotta get out
inspiring.
of here, I think, but then I wasn't learning anything.
Right. Those
but
who inspire us. Yeah, that's incredible.
but I want to thank you for being on the show and
Oh,
sharing
thank
that for your
you.
book. That was great. I haven't actually had an author really do that,
Oh,
which is a cool idea. That you offered to do that. That's why we do the show because we different things happen and you
yes.
let it happen. And it's like, oh, that's a different experience. But thank you very much for
Oh,
your
thank you.
insights.
This was such a pleasure talking with you. Um, you really
Yeah.
are a Renaissance man, and like you know so much in so many different areas that I learned from this.
Well, thank you. I want to let the public know again, go and check out janetzinn.com. And if people click on that, I'm sure they can get to your books and can they book things with you? Can they?
Yes, they can be in touch and they can book if that's an appropriate thing for
Oh,
them.
cool. And that will be fully clickable. We are just live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and
Awesome.
we'll be on all the platforms that you can listen to or watch a podcast by tomorrow. And thank you again for being on the podcast.
Thank you so
Appreciate you
much
being
for
a guest.
having me.
Have a great night.
You too. Okay, bye-bye.